Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here. I'm with Michael Sands. This is the Unbusy podcast show. And Michael, we're fresh back from our travel around Australia and New Zealand. And Michael, we actually went over to the PMC conference in Wellington, which is a property management conference. It's one of the largest events in New Zealand. And Michael, we were promoting your new book, Unbusy, and you wanted me to get on stage and speak on that. And we started off with talking about the biggest complaint in property management that owners have. What is it?
Communication.
Or a lack of, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, I think we could hear a pin drop in the room because everyone could relate to it. And then we shared our stats around our secret shopping that we've been doing, and that 50% of offices that we call where we have to leave a message, or we actually found the phone rang out, no one's picking up at all. We leave a message and no one's actually getting back to us. So everyone right now, we know every city that we go to do secret shopping throughout Australia or New Zealand is that if we're going to be trying to get details of 150 offices, for example, with their fees, we're going to have to call 300. And we know we have to do that. We have to list 300 agents knowing we're only going to be able to speak to 150. And Michael, this is a real problem. So let's talk about this. Why isn't the phone being picked up or phone calls being returned with messages? What's your take on that?
I was talking with an office the other day, actually two offices, right? Different ends of the world, one in WA, one in Queensland, and they both had the exact same scenario. Where the person who answers the phone, the reception, is getting absolutely slammed, absolutely inundated with phone calls, and they can only spend so much time with the person. And I was talking to them about the root cause, trying to find out where's the problem in the office. And they said that at the end of each day, most property managers haven't been able to return all the tenant calls, all the trade calls, and all the owner calls. And if anything, the trade calls probably get a little bit more preference because it's to do with maintenance. But what the receptions are reporting back to the business owners consistently is that owners are not being called back within a fast time frame, and they're calling back the next day, frustrated and angry. And tenants are not being called back or having their emails returned or their text messages returned, or even using the portal inside the property platforms. They are going unresponded. And when we ask the property managers, they just say they're too busy. They have so many micro interruptions during the day that when it gets to the end of the day, they don't want to call anyone back.
What can I say? This is the truth. Having worked in property management myself, I see this all the time. So two things here, everyone. Number one, if we as secret shoppers posing as prospective clients can only speak to half of the offices, let alone the low quality that we get when we do speak to them, there's obviously training in there just in itself. How much business are our offices losing through this chaos at front reception and the chaos that property managers are dealing with? They're not even getting back to what is their 100% priority, which is new business. And Michael, how many times have you heard, when you're in property management, when I was in property management, you speak to a prospective client and said, look, I've called 4 agents and you were the only one that got back to me?
Oh, it's consistent. I mean, even like my example, earlier this year when I was looking myself locally for a property manager to take over an investment property for me, and I rang 5 and 4 of them were the top agents in the area. And the 5th one was the first person that I could speak to, like even for me. So 20% strike rate trying to get through to someone. And I don't think they were even the best, but they delivered on absolutely everything. And they gave me the time of day. But every other agency had a gatekeeper who was overworked and too busy. Can you imagine, like, if they're getting hundreds of calls a day or, 100 calls a day, their expectation to give time, they have to force that phone call through to someone else in the office, a property manager, a BDM, and no time can be given, no care can be given. But the best person who gave me a response was the worst person. Well, they were the best, but out of the 5, they were perceived to be the worst.
So with the secret shopping, 1 out of 2 officers has lost the business. All right. And of each property that you bring on board, what's it worth to the rent roll? It's worth anywhere between $5,000 and $7,000 asset value, plus the $2,000 or $3,000 in fee income that you're not earning per year. This front reception is a real problem that needs to be solved. And going back into the property management business, if landlords are getting a lack of communication being the #1 problem that they complain about with property managers globally, it's not just an Australia and New Zealand problem, owners will leave a rent roll for issues surrounding a lack of communication. Basically, if they're not getting their phone calls returned in a manner that, or a time frame that they see fit, or not getting their emails returned, or whatever, they feel insulted, and they feel offended that their inquiry hasn't been taken seriously, and they will leave the rent roll on these things. So I think, Michael, we can all agree this is a major problem. Okay. So let's talk about now where a virtual assistant comes in, because right now we're about to say something that's very controversial to a lot of people. They're going to, in their mind, thinking that's not possible, but it is. So, Michael, let's talk about let's talk about what you did in your office when you had 650 properties with 1 full-time and 1 part-time property manager only, which is incredible. What did you do to solve this?
So I looked at all lines of communication that were coming into the office. I looked at text messages, property portals, phone calls, emails. And I looked at the time of the day that a lot of the communication came in also, because, I wanted to see if there was triggers around lunchtime, tea breaks, after hours, and so I could put some support around it. But what I realized was that a lot of the communication coming in was from tenants, and they were just calling about the same arbitrary things, wanting to inspect a property, reporting maintenance, questions about their lease, just, the same type of stuff. And also tradespeople, and tradespeople were calling up about access, invoices, wanting to log more maintenance that they found at a property, or discuss that. And it was all the same type of communication. So what I did was I separated my phone lines, and I put in the IVR, the tree system in there, so that when owners rang, they were just fast tracked through to the office, and whoever answered the phone had to be able to give them the time of day. No glorified message taker, not someone who would just pass them on. But for me, it was unbusying the entire office, and the office would forward to the VAs, any tenant, any trades. And so the first point of call that a tenant had to our office was a VA. Not once did a tenant ask, where was I calling? A tenant wants to get their question resolved right away, immediately. If they can get their question touched, answered, or at least they feel like they've been heard, there is no escalation. Same with the tradesperson. They just want to get their query solved right away. So we just trained our VAs how to answer the question. We used, back then, we were using Zendesk, Darren. So we're talking like, almost 10 years ago, right? We're using Zendesk as our automation. We even had Zendesk on our website so that a tenant could go to our website and ask the same question that they would call about. So, and if a tenant rang the office and we didn't have an FAQ for it, we turned that into an FAQ and we put it back onto Zendesk. We had the YouTube video, and it was automated before AI.
Wow. So look, everyone, Michael, I'm just doing a quick commercial break here. Michael's actually written a book called Unbusy Your Property Managers. Make sure you get your hands on that. Just go to unbusyyourpropertymanagers.com. Look, the book is free. All you've got to do is pay for shipping, where Michael actually goes through 30 different tasks that you can take off your busy property managers so they can focus on making sure they get back to their emails and their phone calls and all those sort of things, and not get tied down with mundane, everyday, repetitious tasks that could easily be done by a virtual assistant, including picking up the phone. But Michael, let's get into this, because right now, you've mentioned that a virtual assistant is actually speaking to tradespeople, is actually speaking to tenants, correct? That's what you're saying, isn't it?
100%. Yep, on the phone.
Now,
calling out, taking calls.
On the surface, that sounds like a real solution, all right? Because you're getting that person that's going to be taking up all of that time to connect, so property managers are able to do other things. But right now, I know what listeners are thinking. They're thinking, how can you get a person from the Philippines taking these calls? What about their accent? What about their ability to troubleshoot in an effective way that the tenant or the tradesperson is going to be happy with? These are all the things, Michael, that people are thinking about. Now, firstly, let's just talk about there is a 16 stage process that teams by design go through when it actually takes, like, if out of 100 applicants they end up with 2 successful virtual assistants. There's a very strict process they go through. It's actually covered in the Unbusy book. But Michael, one of the things that is very clear, if we know that that virtual assistant is going to be speaking to tradespeople and tenants, then their English skills are going to be scrutinized. And you actually involve any client, any real estate office is actually involved in the interview process, aren't they?
Yeah, so forgetting the fact that like each client gets to decide who they work with, right? They get to listen and talk to the person and disarm them. Before it gets to that point, Darren, I have final sign off on every team member that joins the company. And I have a disarming conversation with them because we've already gone through their resume. We've already gone through the security checks. We've already gone through checking their workstations and their internet speeds and the compliance. We've already gone through group interviews. The whole process there is so thorough. When I speak with them, I disarm them. I talk to them about things such as family life, food, travel. I get them talking in a really relaxed manner. Now, is that a bit tricky, caging? I want to make sure that I'm not speaking with an over-enthusiastic telco operator. You know, the type you call and every second word is missing, but you get the gist. We've made, I think, close to 2 million phone calls, Darren, across the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and we've only ever had 3 people ask, where am I calling? 2 of them were in Albany, like WA, and we see them on the chat, on the property management chat, saying don't take jobs outside of Australia and things like that. And the third person was a lovely old lady just outside of London. And that's how we verify and check our team's English. I would say most of the English speakers in the Philippines are better than people in Australia and New Zealand and the UK, right? Their quality of English. Now, you got to get your head around a few things. We don't want transactional voices. We don't want that really thick transactional American accent because that can break communication on a phone call. It has to have empathy, sympathy. It's got to be problem solving. The bedside mannerism has to be very important. So we have that selection process nutted down. We have that. We do that every day. We find amazing human beings who today take those phone calls.
Now, you've got quality assurance people as well that are listening to those calls and scrutinizing them as well, correct? To make sure that they are delivering 100%.
Every single one of our phone calls are recorded. And I have a QA team that listen to every single phone call that we make. And they get graded against the quality of the call, the accuracy, how they solve the problem, because I don't want message takers on there. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, Darren, every interruption that comes into the office is at least 20 minutes of trying to get back into the task that they were trying to do. And if an office takes 100 phone calls a day and they've got 5 staff and they each have to take 20 phone calls or 20 times of communication a day, that is a lot of time that they've lost trying to get their day-to-day tasks done. And then at the end of the day, they've had a really busy day. Like, what have you done with the day?
Every interruption is damaging the relationship with landlords, and it's damaging the ability to get new business. I think that's a fair statement, isn't it? But Michael, another big but that comes up is that, because I've got to think like our listeners, right? Another one is, well, but what if, this person sounding like a Filipino, every third phone call I get every day is from someone from the Philippines with a Filipino accent or, another country accent. Michael, how do what's your response to people that are perhaps, discouraged by the use of a Filipino accent?
I don't even see it as a problem. Like, I mean, I'm on the phone frequently calling companies and offices, and we're in countries that are highly multicultural. I mean, from Spanish accents to South American accents to American accents to British accents to Chinese accents to Japanese accents, Philippine accents. Yeah, it's not even a non-issue anymore because we are exposed to such a level of different accents across Australia and New Zealand. It's not even a problem.
My answer is I haven't got a problem in speaking to a Filipino person on a bank call or something, as long as they can sort out my query. And if they can sort out my query, the accent didn't mean anything. It wasn't a problem. And I think anyone can agree what we're saying here. If you've got a problem solved and you've got a satisfactory outcome to your call and your query, especially when you've spent 10 or 15 minutes in a phone queue, all right, which I'm assuming is not going to happen in these real estate offices, then I think that we're conjuring up something in our minds which we don't need to. It's not a problem if the person can solve the issue at hand. And that's obviously where all this training comes from, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, I think the expectation is that whoever answers the phone call needs to be able to resolve the query. And if that's front of house taking the phone call, they should be able to help take ownership of that communication. And by unbusying the property manager, removing the interruptions from their day-to-day, allowing the people in the office or the frontline staff, such as the property manager and reception admin, that's a formidable team. Having your admin being able to take a phone call and spend a number of minutes with the prospect who's calling, making them feel warm and loved, getting their details, the address, and taking ownership of that, you also take that pressure off the BDM who might be in an appointment, might be in an appraisal, caught up, legitimately caught up, and not missing out on the lead. Like that reception, being able to send a pre-listing kit, information on the business effective immediately, having a human touch. Most offices can't do that. Majority.
So, everyone listening, if you are resonating with what we just said, and it is a big problem, let's agree, communication is a massive problem in your agency. You might be that 1 out of 2 that you don't know what's going on at reception. You don't know what's going on in those calls. You don't know what's not being returned because you've got no system there. But every interruption that happens to the property managers is a possible damage to a relationship with a client of something that's not getting done and new business being missed out on. So it's worthy to look at a solution of bringing a person in that can actually take these phone calls off your busy property managers and handle those, give them some breathing space. So, Michael, what's the best way? I'm just challenging people. Get in touch with Michael. Write down your objections. Michael, I don't think what you've just suggested that you told me is a solution is actually going to work for me because. Write it down, throw it at Michael, throw your rocks at him, and let him answer it in a one-on-one meeting with you. Michael, what's the best way that people can get in contact with you?
Any challenge that anyone has, throw it at me. I promise you, I'll be able to resolve it for you. Unbusychat.com. Unbusychat.com will go straight to my diary, find a time that suits you, and let's catch up because I've seen it across multiple countries, thousands of offices. I am confident that I can find a way.
To put aside your preconceived ideas, put aside what I say is your big but Michael, that won't work because, and look and think differently. In this day and age, problems are solved by thinking differently and outside of the square. So anyway, don't forget, get Michael's book, Unbusy Your Property Managers. Go to unbusyyourpropertymanagers.com. Again, the book's free. Just pay for shipping. But Michael, I think we're done. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.